All right, hey everybody, this is Dan Williams. Welcome you back to Truth and Culture or Misconceptions. Originally, I thought this should be called Hot Topics because this is number 4 in 7 topics that I just wanted us to explore. I wanted to explore myself. I don't have all the answers for all these things, but it's been a great study. We looked at abortion, homosexuality, transgenderism, and tonight, Mormonism. Perhaps you know of a Mormon family in your neighborhood or friends with a Mormon, and maybe you don't know a lot about what the Mormon religion teaches or espouses or believes. So we're going to do what it says here, give a biblical response to questions about issues we face. And I'm going to start off with just a simple overview of Mormonism that I took from gotquestions.org. They usually do a pretty good job of an overview of Christian concepts and challenges and questions and topics. So here we go.
Mormon religion, Mormonism, whose followers are known as Mormons and Latter-day Saints, was founded less than 200 years ago by a man named Joseph Smith. He claimed to have received a personal visit from God the Father and Jesus Christ, who told him that all churches and their creeds were an abomination. Joseph Smith then set out to restore true Christianity and claims his church to be the only true church on earth. The problem with Mormonism is that it contradicts, modifies, and expands on the Bible. Mormons believe that there are, in fact, 4 sources of divinely inspired words. The Bible, as far as it is translated correctly, the Book of Mormon, which was translated by Smith and published in 1830, Doctrine and Covenants, containing a collection of modern revelations, and the Pearl of Great Price, which is considered by Mormons to clarify doctrines and teachings that were lost from the Bible. Mormons believe the following about God. He has not always been the supreme being of the universe, but attained that status through righteous living and persistent effort. They believe God the Father has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as man's. Brigham Young taught that Adam was actually God and the father of Jesus Christ, although this teaching has been abandoned by modern Mormon leaders. In contrast, Christians know this about God. There is only one true God. He always has existed and always will exist. He was not created but is the creator. He is perfect, and no one else is equal to him. God the Father is not a man, nor was he ever. He is spirit, and spirit is not made of flesh and bone. Mormons believe that there are different levels or kingdoms in the afterlife: the celestial kingdom, the terrestrial kingdom, the telestial kingdom, and outer darkness. Where mankind will end up depends on what they believe and do in this life. In contrast, the Bible tells us that after death we go to heaven or hell based on whether or not we had faith in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. As believers, after death we are with the Lord, but unbelievers are sent to hell. When Jesus comes the second time, we will receive resurrected and glorified bodies. There will be a new heaven and a new earth for believers, and unbelievers will be thrown into an everlasting lake of fire. There is no second chance for redemption after death. Mormon leaders have taught that Jesus' incarnation was the result of a physical relationship between God the Father and Mary. Mormons believe Jesus is a God, but that any human can also become a God. Mormonism teaches that salvation can be earned by a combination of faith and good works. Contrary to this, Christians historically have taught that no one can achieve the status of God. Only He is holy. We can be made holy in God's sight through faith in Him. Jesus is the only begotten Son of God and is the only one ever to have lived a sinless life. Jesus and God are one in essence, Jesus being the only man who existed before physical birth. Jesus tells us it is impossible to get to heaven by our own works, and that only by faith in Him is it possible. Clearly, there is only one way to receive salvation, and that is to know God and His Son Jesus. Receiving salvation is not done by works, but by faith. We can receive this gift no matter who we are or what we have done. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. Although Mormons are usually friendly, loving, and kind people, they are deceived by a false religion that distorts the nature of God, the person of Jesus Christ, and the means of salvation. And that answers the questions, what is Mormonism and what do Mormons believe?
Well, that video certainly doesn't cut any slack for anything. It pretty well straightforward, lets you know what basic belief differences would be between Christianity and Mormonism. But I want us now to look a little closer at some of the things that I've discovered about the Mormon religion. Other than Scientology, Mormonism is the only religion that was founded in the United States. And like that little video said, it was only created in the last couple hundred years, and that's why they're called Latter-day Saints. That we're in the latter days, and that's why the Mormon Church is also called the LDS Church. Joseph Smith is said to have written all 584 pages of the Book of Mormon in under 3 months. The text follows the lives of early American settlers. Brigham Young was the second president of the church. After Joseph Smith was murdered in 1844, Brigham Young led the Mormon followers to Utah, where he founded Salt Lake City. He is often referred to as a modern Moses. Mormonism believes that the God of Abraham was a person living on a distant planet that circled a star called Kolob. This God was king of the planet and had celestial intercourse to produce the human population. So, right off the bat, you see some tenets of Joseph Smith's teaching and manufactured belief are some pretty wild sounding things, somewhat bizarre. Mormons believe that Jesus and Satan were brothers that were both born from celestial intercourse. The two were friends until they got into a divisive philosophical debate. The divide between Jesus and Satan was over the idea of free will for the humans of earth. Satan insisted on the exclusion of moral agency, while Jesus believed humans should have the right to choose their path. None of this is true. And I'd heard this before. There used to be a movie called The God Makers. It was kind of an expose of Mormonism, and that was back in the 70s, I think. But according to Mormonism, all good religious believers become gods when they die. Inheriting omnipotent and omniscient powers, the gods can then create their own planets and their own people. So that's why this, and as a matter of fact, this is a picture from that controversial film that I was speaking of, but that Mormons are God makers that if they live right and are faithful, loyal to the Mormon doctrine, that they may be able to become a god themselves and have their own planet and govern their own world. Another very bizarre idea. While Christianity and Judaism believe the Garden of Eden was at least in the Middle East or Mesopotamia somewhere, Mormons teach that the Garden of Eden was in Missouri. And I have no idea why that was selected. Maybe a beautiful part of the country, but they believe that the Garden of Eden began in America. The debate around polygamy has been an infamous aspect of the Mormon religion for centuries. The practice of having many wives was an official church doctrine, and even claims that if a man does not have at least two wives, well, he will not become a god. In the late 1800s, polygamy was outlawed in the United States. However, some branches of Orthodox Mormonism continue this practice. And I can't see how any man shall leave his mother, or man shall leave his father and mother, leave her home. The two shall become as one. How and I guess people make a case for polygamy because you have Bible characters like Abraham that had Sarah and then a concubine wife. You had Jacob had Rachel and Leah. Solomon had many wives. These are records of what these men did. That doesn't mean that that was God's intention and plan for them. And so, according to Mormonism, all women who are not believers of the church become a harem to a Mormon man in the afterlife. Oh, joy. Here's something most people have heard about, kind of giggle about, I guess. While many, because they refer to this as the holy underwear, while many religions have ceremonial garments such as hats or jewelry, Mormons have temple garments, which consist of white t shirts and white knee length boxer shorts. And they utilize these garments in ritual um, ceremonies in the temple. And I suppose that there are Mormons that believe that they are to wear these constantly, every day, to wear these um, garments. I just frankly don't know enough about the Mormon temple garments as to how often they are required to wear these. Now, Utah has the biggest population of Mormons in North America, and it is home to several LDS churches as well as Brigham Young University. So this is where the Mormon Tabernacle. This is the Mormon Tabernacle. You've heard of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, a very good choir, but they're comprised of all Mormons, and this is the Mormon Temple. There are Mormon prohibitions that maybe you're aware of. On Sundays, Mormons are not allowed to watch TV or films and cannot play sports either. Mormons are not permitted to consume anything that pollutes the body or affects the mind, which includes caffeinated tea and coffee, but caffeinated soft drinks are okay. No matter what age you are, Mormons cannot consume alcohol. And you look at these prohibitions and say, all Mormons are this or that. Well, there's some things you could say about, Baptists. Typically, it was said throughout history that Baptists were prohibitionists, that Baptists do not drink. I grew up in a Baptist home, and, smoking and drinking were definitely, vices that a good Baptist would not do. This, of course, is not to say that all Mormons uh, attain to these. Um, but this is what's kind of in the foundation and the baseline of Mormon prohibitions. Mormons are prohibited from discussing the church's practices and sacred ceremonies. It is also forbidden to talk negatively about Mormonism or the religion's leadership. If there's anything that can be said about the Mormons in general, there's a lot of control over its membership. And there's a lot of church discipline. Maybe we don't have enough church discipline in most of our evangelical churches, um, and that's why churches run into a lot of problems and splits and let a lot of apostasies and heresies and abominations happen because we're not really good on knowing how to conduct church discipline. Sometimes churches don't vet people very well. I've seen churches that on any given Sunday, somebody can walk down an aisle and say, I want to join this church. And they say, oh, wonderful. Here, sign this card. Um, Extend the right hand of fellowship. All in favor say aye. And there's not much else vetted about a person as to what their, moral life is like. Are they homosexual? Are they living together? Just what? So, but Mormonism is kind of the other extreme. There's a great deal of monitoring and church discipline that goes on, and they generally will not tolerate um, talking negatively about Mormonism or their leadership. You've seen pictures like this or fellows like this, young Mormon men and women are strongly encouraged to do a mission trip after graduating from high school. For a 2 year period, missionaries are placed in locations around the world to serve the church and recruit followers. So you've seen maybe in pairs of two riding bicycles, young men, the white shirts typically, and they do this on a 2 year mission trip. It could be around a different part of the country in a different state, and they're funded by other Mormons or perhaps some church help. I'm not sure, but they, fund them to be able to stay in motels, purchase them bicycles, get them in a location, expect them to just daily, this is their job, to ride bikes, go into neighborhoods, knock on doors, and talk about Mormonism. Now, here's something I didn't know about post-mortem baptizing. Now, just to give a clarification here, I just found this picture. I don't know. They're really not talking about baptizing a dead person. Um, but when I was Googling post-mortem baptism, this picture came up. This very well could be someone who was stricken with some particular illness or crippling disease or something, and they baptize her. But it almost looks like they're baptizing a dead person. But one of the most controversial Mormon practices is the tradition of baptizing the dead. But this is, and I'll explain a little bit later, of neither the person nor their families need consent for Mormon post-mortem baptizing. To add clarity to this, they don't really baptize a dead person. They're proxies that can stand in for someone that has already died, and they can baptize. It's almost makes you think of, the Catholic doctrine of praying someone out of purgatory, that someone that's already dead, we here on earth could do something to ensure their eternal destiny. And here's an explanation of that. It's a practice within the Mormon faith that where a living person baptizes on behalf of a deceased individual. Mormons believe that this practice allows those who have died to receive the blessings of baptism, even if they did not have the opportunity to receive it during their lifetime. Members of the church perform these baptisms in dedicated temples, and the deceased can choose to accept or reject the ordinances performed on their behalf. Now, I don't know how that happens. The deceased can choose to accept or reject. Uh, if they're already dead, how do they choose that? I can't answer that. So, what is the difference between Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses? Sometimes these two groups are confused, and maybe because of these kinds of pictures. Which ones of these is the Mormons and which is the Jehovah's Witness? Well, I just gave the answer away 2 slides ago. The Mormons are the ones that are the white shirts typically and bicycles. Jehovah's Witnesses, they also do a lot of door-to-door evangelism, and they very much will dress very properly. Neatness and cleanliness is very, very strict importance in Jehovah's Witnesses. But the Jehovah's Witnesses really use there are two publications that they use, and one of them is the Bible, but it is a particular translation of the Bible, the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. And now I can't get my hands on one of these. You can buy them on Amazon. I was looking to see if BibleHub.com, which shows a lot of, like 29 different translations of any Bible verse, I couldn't find that they um, use translations that are from New World Translation. Most of these scriptures in this edition will be just like the Bible, but there are some, like pointed out, that where John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The New World Translation says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. So you get some subtle but very important differences. And of course, the other publication Jehovah's Witnesses are known for is the Watchtower. It is an ongoing teaching publication magazine that is just part and parcel of Bible study and research and being a good Jehovah's Witness, keep up on what's going on. Now, this study, I'm not really focusing in on Jehovah's Witnesses. Frankly, I think there are fewer problems with Jehovah's Witness beliefs and Mormons. There are definitely more issues and controversial issues with Mormons. So we're going to stick with Mormons, but I just thought I'd throw this in there. But the Mormons have interesting that they do use the King James Version of the Bible, but they have three other books that are part and parcel of their doctrine and theology. And one, of course, is the Book of Mormon, translated by Joseph um, Smith, and it's like I said, it's back in the 1800s, so it's counted as scripture along with the Bible. Well, then there's two more publications. That's the Doctrine and Covenants, you saw in that first video, and another book called The Pearl of Great Price. So any good Mormon is going to have this arsenal of all four of these books, and to learn these and digest these fully is their goal. Now, what is the Baptist view of Mormonism? I Googled this question. You could Google it too. But this is what I found. The Baptist view of Mormonism is rooted in the belief that both faiths share a common foundation in Christianity, but they differ in their interpretations of key doctrines. Baptists, for instance, do not recognize the Book of Mormon as valid scripture, viewing it as a separate religious text. They also do not believe in the concept of eternal progression. And so I had to kind of look at what that is. That eternal progression has to do with this um, you becoming your own God, and they're perpetuating another Earth like planet somewhere. Mormons hold as a core tenet of their faith. Additionally, Baptists do not practice proxy baptism. That's what that post-mortem baptism, proxy baptism. Baptists would never go along with anything like that, or other ordinances performed on behalf of deceased ancestors, as Mormons do. Now, for the next 15 minutes, to kind of round out this lesson, I'm going to let you hear a condensed version, 15 minutes, of a testimony of a friend of ours. Lana Larson is her husband, Randy. I never met him. He has passed away. About 5 years ago, she became a widow. She lives in Utah. She's a friend of ours that we got acquainted online with Bible studies that we do. And since she came out of Mormonism, we had her share her testimony, and it's quite fascinating, firsthand testimony of what her experience was. Now, she doesn't get into a lot of the doctrine and the beliefs. What you will get from her testimony, like I said, it really points out the deep controlling nature of Mormonism. This is why I think Mormonism is compared to more as a cult, because of um, the hard and fast and strict control. It's almost like brainwashing or mind control over its constituents. So let me turn my microphone off, and we're going to just listen to Lana. I have online today Lana Larson, and I just would like for Lana to introduce herself. And first of all, remind everybody where you live.
I live in the heart of Utah, right in the center. It's called Gunnison. It's a small town.
Utah.
Yep.
And so your testimony is so fascinating because the Father took you through a lot of transformations and a long journey to get where you are today. But being there in Utah, you were very much in Mormon country, and so you've got a lot of experience that could enlighten us to help us know a couple things. First of all, just to rejoice and praise the Father with you of where He's brought you, but also to give us a little more insight of how we can pray for our Mormon friends, and you know, we probably all know someone who's Mormon or work with a Mormon, and maybe a deeper insight into how you know the whole LDS church functions, and how we can pray for these people as well. So let me just let you share those, all of this information, and just take it from the top. where did you where did you begin? How did you were born and raised in a Mormon family?
I was born and raised, yes, here in the valley, in Gunnison Valley. Very, very small town, just outside Gunnison's called Axtell. There were probably 50 families in Axtell. Everybody was Mormon, except the ones who were, you know, called Jack Mormons because they didn't attend a church, and they did actually were baptized, but that's about as far as it went. But so everybody was Mormon. I didn't know anything else. I just did not. When you grow up in such a Mormon environment, it must be like, I don't know, the Amish, or you just never have any exposure to anything else, especially in such a small town. And so I was born Mormon, baptized Mormon, raised Mormon. I met my husband, who was also raised in Gunnison, but we didn't know each other because he was 4 years older than me. And so it was just like eighth grader and, you know, high schooler, I mean, senior. So we didn't ever really cross paths until I was ready to go to college. My parents did not take me to church, but they made sure and send me to church. My parents would be some of those Jack Mormons. And so I always went. All my friends were Mormons. And anyway, that's how I was raised. We were raised to make sure that boys were raised to go on missions. The girls were raised to marry the missionaries when they got home. And that's just basically how it was. And of course, that would be a temple marriage. So my husband and I met, like I said, after I graduated, and I was going to go to the same college as him, the university, BYU. And so he decided he would ask me out. And shall we say, the rest is history. We dated and got married and started a family. Yes, we went to the Mormon temple and got married, which was kind of different, almost spooky looking back, because there's a lot of rituals up there in the temple. There's a lot of oaths that you take, that you even swear to kill yourself if you reveal these signs and tokens, they call them, to anyone else. They gave us each a new name. Mine was Martha. Randy's, my husband, was Abraham, and he could not ever tell me his name. We were sworn not to tell anybody else our names, but our husbands, we could tell. I mean, the husband could know the wife's name because he would actually take you through the veil of the temple.
So he could know your name, but you were not to know his name.
That's right. I didn't know his name until we left Mormonism. Then he said, "Oh, by the way, my name's Abraham."
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what we did. We had our family. We went to BYU. Randy was deciding. Now, he'd been doing a lot of study. He had been inactive for a while, much to my dismay. So we did a lot of word exchanging about why he was inactive, and I just couldn't believe it. I just told him, "You'll never take me from my church," and never cast a gauntlet down there in front of the Father, because he'll show you. So anyway, our last son was 8 years old, and Randy was already leaving. And the Mormon church called him in and said, would you teach gospel doctrine class in Sunday school? Now, this was a tactic to get him activated, which is really funny. Why would you want somebody who had become inactive to teach the gospel doctrine class? But anyway, they did, and he said, yes, if I don't have to use the manual, I will not use the church manual, but I will teach out of the Bible. And they said, that's great. We're studying the Old Testament this year. They give the Old Testament 1 year to study, the New Testament 1 year to study, the Book of Mormon 1 year to study, and the Doctrine and Covenants, that's their book written by Joseph Smith. Of course, so's the Book of Mormon, another year, and then they repeat those. And so you practically get the same lessons over and over. But he said, if I don't have to use the manual, I'll be glad to. So he was really excited about that, because he's wanting to share things that he was learning. And I was excited because it brought him back to church.
But how big was this church? How many people were in your particular church?
Oh gosh, probably 300 in our ward, and there were 3 wards most of the time, and now it's grown to 5 because they have a prison ward as well. So
okay, so they call the various congregations are called wards.
Wards, yes. Yeah, first ward, second ward, I know. So where was I? Okay, he was teaching gospel doctrine class, and I remember distinctly one of our good friends and a doctor held his hand up one day and said, Randy, I think you're leading us astray. So so there were not everybody came to his class. They split the Sunday school class and to go into the manual again and again and again. That's what some people wanted to do. Other people wanted to hear this new stuff that Randy was teaching. So then the second year rolled around, and he was teaching the New Testament, and he was okay with that. The third year rolled around, and he went to the bishopric, and he said, I can't teach Book of Mormon. I believe Joseph Smith wrote it, and I can't teach it. And do you know, they still said to him, well, can't you find something in the Book of Mormon where you can jump into the Bible and teach that? They were so desperate, I guess, to have him there. He said, sure. So he did that, and the fourth year gospel doctrine, he went to them again. He goes, no, really, I'm not teaching this. And so he quit, and that was just supposed to be a sabbatical. He was supposed to come around and teach Old Testament again the next year. So we went to the gospel doctrine class just to sit in it for a couple of weeks, and we just looked at each other and said, we can't do this. I mean, by that time, I was even out. I was out. We were out in our hearts. I mean, after that we battled for about 4 years, and then I have to say this. If you have somebody who's LDS, get them to read No Man Knows by My History by Fawn Brody. It's a marvelous book. She went back to Palmyra, New York, his stomping ground, and uncovered newspaper articles and documents from courthouses, and found out information that, of course, had been totally covered up and hidden by the Mormon Church. And she wrote this book, No Man Knows My History. And I refused to read it for a while. And my husband kept pressing, bless his heart, and said, please read this book. So I prayed about it. I said, Father, if this is true, I need you to tell me. And if it's not, then I'm staying where I am. So I read the book, and the light just shined on Joseph Smith for what he is. And I said to my husband, I'm done. You win. You got it. You know, and I do too. And if we know as peons in the Mormon Church, so does the general authorities. And So anyway, we wrote down, it took us several pages of reasons why we were leaving the Mormon church. And we walked into the bishop's office after church one day and we said, here's our letter. We are leaving the Mormon church. The look on his face was absolutely astounding because we had grown up with this man in Gunnison. And I was friends, very good friends with his wife. We were in a singing group together. And he said, I'm not going to read this. He says, but I have questions to ask you. And these are laid out for bishops and so forth. When somebody says they're leaving, he goes, where are you putting your tithing dollars? That was the first question. We'd been faithful tithers all of our lives. And we just said, that's really not your concern anymore. Because we've got a program, you can just put it right to the Boy Scouts. And we went, that's just still not your concern. We're not going to, you don't need to know that. And then he asked us if we were going to proselyte. And we said, if you mean go door to door, no, we're not going to do that. Okay, so anyway, there was a third question, but I still haven't remembered what it is. So he said, well, okay, and he just laid our letter down and on his desk and dismissed us. And so we felt really good about that, and we went on vacation. Well, by the time we got back, the stake president had his counselors show up at our door and say, we would like you to come and meet with the stake president. Okay, so we went to the stake president's office and sat with him in his little office, and I have never seen a meaner look on anybody's face in my whole life as when we told him we were leaving. And he didn't want to read the letter either. He was just mad. He was just mad. And he was so afraid that we were going to be polygamous or something, and he was not going to have that in his kingdom in this area. And he talked to us, and it just didn't make any difference. And he said to us, the very bricks behind me will testify against you at the end times. And we said, okay, whatever you say. And we just left, and we were fine with that. We sort of laughed about it when we got out of the doors, but then we got summoned to a court. And we have to wonder how they could bring us to a court when we had just resigned from the Mormon Church. But we thought it was going to be the stake presidency and all of his counselors, which included about, I don't know, 12 probably. Anyway, so we thought, well, maybe we can say something that might stir somebody up, because I mean, it would just be wonderful if our whole ward left, or all these, because they got to be able to see this once we start talking. Well, not so much. Not unless opens their eyes. So we went to this court-martial sort of thing, and they said they wanted to know why we were leaving, and we were glad to tell them. And they said, well, can your kids keep coming to our programs? And we said, no, they will not be learning this doctrine any further. And in fact, we're teaching against this doctrine now in our home, so they won't be coming to the programs. And they said, okay, well, will you wait out in the hall? Wait out in the hall. Now we're going to deliberate. All right, so we waited out in the hall. 45 minutes they deliberated and left us out there, and we were just chuckling. We had somebody to visit with, and we went in, and they said, well, we've decided that we have to excommunicate you. And it's like, on what grounds? And they said apostasy. Good enough. That's exactly what we're doing. So whatever. But they didn't tell us that they were going to go to every ward. Not that it would have made a difference, but they went to every other ward. And there are, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 wards in the valley, maybe 7. And they said they sent counselors to each one of those wards, and they said, these people have been excommunicated. They didn't mention the fact that we had already left. They've been excommunicated, and you're not to have anything to do with them. And so people didn't. I mean, it was just that fast, just dropped, like dropped off a hook. Um, we didn't have any friends here. Nobody really wanted to look us in the eye. I had my visiting teachers, they call them. They go out 2 by 2. They used to do home teachers. That was 2 guys that would come to your whole family. And visiting teachers, which was the ladies' organization, would come 2 by 2 to a lady's house. Oh, by the way, when we left, Randy was still the gospel doctrine teacher, and I was Relief Society president, which meant the leader of the ladies' groups. So anyway, I had the visiting teachers come by one more time, and one of them said to me, "Why did you leave?" And the other one threw it, which was my friend, the bishop's wife, threw her hands up over her ears and says, "No, no, no, don't say anything. I don't want to hear it." And so I said, "Sandy, why don't you come back when I can talk to you alone?" And so anyway, that's the kind of reaction we got everywhere. We don't want to hear about this. We don't want to know why you left. You've been excommunicated. That's as low as you can go, and we can't be friends with you. So that's how it happened that we left the Mormon Church. And you know what? We never missed anyone. However, we did get caught up into a Christian church. We had to drive. We could walk across the street to go to the home ward, but when we decided to be Christian, we had to drive about 40 minutes south of here to join, and we did. And they were so excited that they had new ex-Mormons in their group. They just made this big fuss over us, and will you give your testimony and all this stuff. Anyway, we stayed there. Let's see, 97 to about, well, almost 20 years, 18 maybe.
Well, I just think that's a powerful testimony and appreciate Lana Larson sharing all these things. And that was um, a 15-minute version of a longer interview I had with her. But so what's the conclusion for this tonight? This is what I've come up with. While there are some very basic commonalities among the monotheistic beliefs of Christians, Mormons, and Jehovah's Witnesses pertaining to salvation's dependency upon the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the doctrinal differences are very significant, particularly with Mormonism. These differences are very deceptive and can lead people away from the purest truths about the Father's plan for mankind. But it seems to me that the most obvious red flag about Mormonism is the control issues by the church leadership over its constituents. And I guess from like Lana's testimony, among the congregation. Like cultic organizations, it's easy to get in, but difficult to get out. Let me say that again. Like cultic organizations that seem like a cult, they're easy to get in, but very difficult to get out. And the higher one's position in the organization, the greater degree of secret disclosures or privileged information about the inner workings of the church that we don't see in the hierarchy of mainstream evangelicals. Now, every religion is, by its very nature, it's exclusive towards every other religion, and every religion is like that. But both Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses have proceedings for excommunication and disfellowshipping members who leave the organization. We don't do that as Baptists to shun someone. We go more with the scripture that says if a brother is caught in sin, then you who are godly go to such a one and seek to restore them, not by coercion or pressure or excommunicating or shunning. So I see that as a big difference with the overall who we represent as Christ's ambassadors for love in this world. We always want to maintain, just as we've learned with our position on dealing with homosexuals or transgenders. We want to love these people and seek to tell them the truth. That's what Lana and her husband, they were excited to have an opportunity to enlighten their Mormon. They thought, oh, if we go before this board, maybe we can say some things that might spark an interest in one of the board members. Um, but I think they came to realize only the Holy Spirit can really do a work in people that are this entrenched with a particular lifestyle or a particular ideology. Yes, we are to always, I think, pray for people, and I think it's good. Think the best of people until proven otherwise, but seek to share the love of Jesus Christ and the gospel of Jesus Christ with whoever we can. And so, with that, I'll say goodbye with this edition, and we'll see you next week as we talk about Freemasonry. All right, have a good one. We'll see you next week.